Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about code reviews. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, what is the most important thing you have learned about software design during code reviews? Let people write code that is good enough, I would say. That's the most important thing I've learned. So let me explain that a little bit before you like Shanghai me over talking blasphemy and saying that, oh, is there anything besides perfect code? Yes, there is. And I'm not advocating for people making bad and shitty implementations or anything like that. The people I'm trying to reach with my little statement here is the sort of people, and you know who you are, the sort of people who will point out things they don't like about somebody's implementation, but when asked, you either don't know how to improve the thing, or you suggest just an alternative way of writing the same thing, and that alternative way, you don't really know why you like it all that much, or you have an arbitrary reason for why you want the people to write that way. These are the people I want to talk to. Stop that shit, guys, right now. It is the best tip that I can give you, because what will happen is that you will realize that the idea that we all know and love / hate, depending on how you look at it, that code should look as one person wrote it, is absolute bullshit. That is a statement that is true for things such as using single quotes versus double quotes, or using various types of formatting or different types of languages or stuff like that. But it is not something that it's all that important to sort of force people to do if the choice is between a for each loop or a for loop, or using one of the iterator methods depending on your language and stuff like that. That doesn't matter unless you have something a really good idea as to why you have to do something like that versus not doing something like that. Just let it be, because the thing that creates the most anxiety and the most conflict in any software project, as far as I'm concerned at the very least, is the code review. If you have any idea of the sheer amount of hours and time that goes into mitigating some of the problems that come from the code review from managers and like various companies and so forth, you will understand why most software companies value technical skills, but also in almost equal measure soft skills, as we call them. Those soft skills are one part so that you can talk to your stakeholders and have a good interaction with them, but it's also due down to this. And one of the most mature, I argue, things that you can do, and basically what I argue is the sign of true, like really skilled leaders and so forth, is to understand the difference between something that is bad and something that is just not the way you would have done it. And that is a very important distinction to make. It's one of the most important lessons that I learned at the very least when it comes to software design, because as I've explained in other videos before, guys, there is no situation where you will write a perfect implementation of something and then that's going to stay perfect forever. It's just something you're telling yourself, because the second you move from the project, you're on vacation or anybody else has to touch it, like, are you going to play like gatekeeper for that awesome code that you wrote and that project that is so perfect and so forth, so nobody else gets to touch it? Probably not. And at some point, and I've even said so to a few guys, which is hilarious to me, you have some people who are so strict with this thing I'm talking about that they actually cause enough tension in the team that they get fired, and now look where your code went. So you spent all that energy and it caused all those issues just to keep that pristine code perfect, just the way you wanted it, and now you don't work on it anymore. Are you lying up at night thinking about how everybody's fucking up your code? Or like, no, probably not. I'm guessing you moved on with your life to the next project, and then you start the whole cycle over again, because just the problem is that during the time that you are in charge of this code, you treat it as your thing, as something that is to be perfected by yourself. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't try to perfect your craft, perfect your code. I'm saying that you have to understand that just as say a football team or any group of people, the main thing is that the net of what is happening is good. And small deviations, if I look at my own code just as an example, if you went to my repositories now, I am pretty sure that if you look hard enough, you're going to find deviations in approaches on things that I could have done exactly the same thing in the same way in multiple files. And sometimes I did this and sometimes I did that, and I can't really tell you why I did it. Yet some people who are, and I've worked with them, I'm very sorry to say, who are religious fanatics about this will be, oh, the extremist one, he got fucking pissed at me. He got literally angry over the fact that in one situation I had used this approach versus another approach, because I could have done the exact same thing in both situations, but due to this thing that, you know, it should look the same way if it's one person who wrote it. So I asked him, how do you explain my code then? It is one person who wrote it, but it doesn't look like one person wrote it. And so we got into a philosophical discussion about what does it matter if one person wrote it or multiple, like if it looks that way, where do you draw the line? And that's of course an argument that can go on forever. And so we finally concluded, and I hope that you can agree here, that it's good if you can make things as consistent as possible, because consistency usually makes it easier for people to maneuver and read the source. And when you understand that part, that the thing that is important is how comprehensible the code is. And that's the reason why we're using this, you know, we should all write code so that it looks like one person wrote it type of thing. That is for our benefit. So in other words, it is less important that everything is exactly the same as long as it's comprehensible. And that is the most important lesson that I learned from code reviews. Comprehensible code is better. It's going to lead to less friction between you and your coworkers, because what's going to happen basically is that you're going to be less nitpicky about small details that don't make any fucking difference. My rule is usually this: unless the code is bad to the point where I see severe issues with it that I can point at, I can concretely say this is going to cause a bug, or it's going to cause misunderstandings, or it's messily wrote or anything like that. Unless it's something like that, if it's minor things where I would have done this and they did that, I don't even talk about it. I might make a suggestion, if you want to do it, you fix it, but I try to be very light on, like pointing and saying that this is wrong and so forth and so forth, because it really is just a subjective way of looking at it. And that is just something that is not worth having yet another discussion about, because as I said, guys, most of the conflicts that you're going to have in the workplace are going to be a direct result of how you act in the code reviews. And so what I like to say, I like the approach where I try to have as few rules as possible, but the rules that I do have are only there so that nothing breaks in production or things don't get so out of hand that nobody understands what's going on. And that is why I argue really good leadership, like that's the balance. If you're going to be a king or like make laws or so forth and so forth, you want your people to feel like they have a choice and they can be themselves and do what they want. And you want to have guardrails in place so that they don't do anything too extreme or too dangerous. And that balance, where you give people too much freedom versus forcing them to do, like to be too restrictive, it's doing that, balancing that thing, I argue, is the mark of truly professional and great leadership. So what I want you to take away from this is that the most important thing I learned about software design during code review is to know when to try to get people to do what I want versus when I let them to do versus when I let them do what they want. And I argue that it's a fine balancing act. My argument is, and is still, it used to be and it's still to this day, that the goal of the code review and the goal of having like all the things that we do, like all the rituals and so forth related to the software, is to make sure that one, the code works, and two, that it is easy to maintain over time and comprehensible, like these sorts of things. As long as you're not in direct violation of any of those two things, try to be a bit lighter about your opinions. Because as I said, guys, there's a million ways to do things, and like you have one favorite way, somebody else has another favorite way and so forth. But if you want to have a good working relationship, it's better for you to allow people a little bit of leeway, even if they do things slightly differently from you. If you don't really have a good argument for why they shouldn't do it that way, just let it be. And be a little bit like, it's healthy for you as well to distance yourself a little bit emotionally from the code that you are writing, because it's never going to be completely perfect, and the second you quit and go somewhere else, somebody else is going to fuck it up for you. So if you're too opinionated, it's probably healthier for you to back away a little bit and let people do a little bit of, give people a little bit of breathing space and so forth. And it's very likely that you're going to find that your relationships are going to be easier to maintain with other software developers if you don't poke them over every little, like if you're not nitpicky about every little little thing. So try to, as I said, focus more on the stuff that really has impact and leave the rest to be a little bit loose. Have a great day.